Good day. My name is Sam Westrop. I am the director of the Islamist Watch Project, and welcome to the Middle East Forum's regular series of webinars. I'm delighted to be joined today by Ahnaf Kalam, who will be speaking to us on the subject of deceitful Islamists, the interesting rise in the examples of falsified or seemingly falsified hate crimes. And this is a subject we've written and talked about a bit before. But Ahnaf, let's head straight into it. Ahnaf is a writer and a researcher. He contributes to the Focus on Western Islamism, our counter-Islamist publication, and is a contributor to a variety of prominent mainstream media outlets around the country. Ahnaf, tell us about this rather interesting sheikh you've been writing about in recent days, Uthman Ibn Farooq. Who is he? Where does he come from? And what sparked your interest in this man?
Yes. Uthman Ibn Farooq is a preacher who is based in San Diego, California. He is perhaps best well known for his street dawah, where he sets up a booth on the streets of San Diego, and he will proselytize Islam, and he will debate people of other faiths. Uthman Ibn Farooq, in March of this year, had claimed publicly that he was stabbed by a knife-wielding man shouting anti-Muslim slurs at him. And after he reported on this incident, it had gone viral. It was reported across the globe in a very short amount of time. It reached as far as South Africa and Nigeria. But I saw the video of the alleged incident after it had gone viral, and right away, it just did not pass the sniff test for me. There were way too many red flags, from the questionable blood you see in the photo he posted immediately after the attack, the lack of an actual video documenting the altercation, the way that he would later speak about the incident publicly. It just didn't add up. And so, curious to find answers as to what actually happened, I first searched through the San Diego City's public records database, and I found nothing. And so then I contacted the San Diego Police Department, who told me that Uthman never even so much as filed a police report to them about the incident. After I reported these findings in an article at FWI, Uthman Ibn Farooq chose to double down on his story. He basically claimed that he didn't file the report with the San Diego Police Department, but rather with another police department within the greater San Diego County. He also came up with this very lazy excuse that if he were to release any details about the incident or about his attacker, who is now supposedly in jail, then his own personal information might get leaked and his security would be compromised because apparently Islamophobes would come after him. Now, since Uthman had specifically named the San Diego County, I decided to get in touch with the San Diego County's district attorney's office. And once again, they told me that they have not received any records from this case from any law enforcement agencies in the entire county.
Okay, interesting. And so, well, I mean, quite a few questions come out of this, but one, I think that's the key one, is why was the media so willing initially to believe the sheikh's claim to have been attacked? Why was there an initial rush to report? Was there any skepticism from local media, from international media about this?
Once it was reported that this incident likely never took place, we didn't really get many retractions or clarifications or any edits to any mainstream reporting on this story. I feel that is because oftentimes the mainstream media is also complicit in trying to paint a certain narrative. We saw this with that infamous Jussie Smollett hoax, and it's the same narrative that these Islamists are trying to portray. Before the details are even released, they will jump on these stories and Deep down, I personally think that it's because they desperately want these hoaxes to be true so that they can effectively portray the world as us versus them, or as, we are the victims, they are the oppressors. It's very easy. That narrative is very effective in bringing people to your cause when people see you as the perceived victimized underdog in any circumstance.
Now, I should mention to the audience, if you have questions for Ahnaf as we discuss this, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, type a question, I'll be able to see it, and I'll try to get to it in due course. Ahnaf, I understand you recently attended a conference where this Sheikh Ibn Farooq was speaking. Did you ask him there about these claims, about his claims to have been stabbed, and your findings that he may have made the whole thing up?
Yeah, so last weekend, Uthman Ibn Farooq was one of the speakers present at a Salafist Islamist convention in my city in Colorado. It was called Ahnaf Kalam. And so I purchased a ticket to this event in hopes that I could ask Uthman directly about the incident. And so Sunday evening, when I was finally able to ask my question, predictably, Uthman was unable to provide a single answer. Instead, he resorted to shouting. He resorted to name calling. He called me a liar. He called me an Islamophobe. At one point, in a desperate last-ditch effort to dodge the question, he even claimed at one point that these people write for these same websites that also claim that school shootings involve paid actors, which I shouldn't have to say is absolute nonsense, but it's just another tactic that he was using to dodge the question once again.
Okay, so we have this situation. We have a very prominent street preacher seemingly faking a stabbing attack on himself, along with a video and a huge amount of press. We have that video now apparently exposed, and we have him getting very defensive in public, calling you a liar and so on. Will there ever be a reckoning for someone like Ibn Farooq, who lies, who deceives his way into claiming that the Islamophobia problem is so great that he is literally being stabbed as he tries to carry out his preaching on the streets of San Diego?
Well, there in his particular case, I believe that the answer is no, because I don't know what further recourse exists for Uthman Farooq. The San Diego Police Department, the San Diego County District Attorney's Office, a number of other local police departments have all said the exact same thing, which is they've not even heard of this incident. They have no recollection or any record of this ever taking place. So I think this is why Uthman Ibn Farooq and other people who do these things, this is why they resort to the things that they're doing right now. All they can do is deflect and call their critics liars, call their critics Islamophobic, because he knows, I'm sure, deep down that that's all he can do. If he really wanted to clear his name and set the record straight, it would have been very easy to provide even a name, any piece of information pertinent to the case, but he's been unable to do that.
And I suppose even if we can't see evidence of it, there'll be plenty of ordinary Muslims out there, moderate, regular Muslims, who become aware of your writings, become aware of your pieces, and someone like Ibn Farooq will be less welcome in their mosque, in their community center, and so on. So perhaps his reckoning is a slow burn, a more long-term, pernicious revenge than something we can see and claim credit for. But this is fascinating, because a lot of Islamist groups in this country, and I'm sure our listeners will be aware of this, have they spend a great deal of time justifying their existence because of this apparent vast Islamophobia threat, as they call it. Now, there's no doubting that there is occasionally violence against Muslims, and some horrific violence at that, by very unpleasant, dangerous, radical networks of other sorts. But is this happening on a scale that people like Ibn Farooq or groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations would like us to believe? Is this happening altogether? Is Ibn Farooq just the exception, and most of all the other incidents are genuine? Do you think, or should we be more skeptical of his claims of an onslaught of Islamophobic attacks across America?
Well, Ibn Farooq's incident is certainly not the exception, in that while absolutely these attacks against Muslims absolutely happen to a scale that we may not know, but it is very common, very frequent, that we have had these instances of Muslims staging anti-Muslim acts that end up getting debunked. But nevertheless, you have groups like CARE, like you just mentioned. You have MPAC, the Muslim Public Affairs Council, who also will run with these stories without checking them, without a moment of scrutiny. And these fake Islamophobic hate crimes happen much more frequently than, I would say, real ones do, from what I've gathered here. For instance, in 2016, a Muslim student in Louisiana reported that she was approached by two males, one wearing a Donald Trump hat and the other shouting racial and religious slurs at her. She claimed that the two men forced her to give them her wallet and her hijab. Later, she was charged by the police department for filing a false report when it was revealed that this never likely took place. This whole thing was staged and set up. Another instance that really stands out here, very similar, a year later in 2017, a Muslim student at San Diego State University had reported that two men had approached her after allegedly making comments about Islam and Muslims and about Donald Trump. But this time, not only did the girl claim that the two men who approached her stole her purse and her backpack, but she also initially reported that they stole her car. She later redacted this part, but after later investigation, it was determined that the investigators on the case were confronted with a hoax. The victim of the alleged incident stopped cooperating with law enforcement altogether. And there are so many similar cases just like this one, so many manufactured hoaxes. But what's most remarkable to me is that they invent so many hoaxes, and they are so dependent on these hoaxes to push their agenda and construct their narrative, of course, with the help of groups like CARE and MPAC and others. And yet they still have not worked out how to make these fake hate crimes even remotely believable for the most part.
So just to dive in, if you had to hazard a guess, why does it benefit Islamist groups to portray this deeply dangerous Islamophobic society? In other words, why does it benefit Islamist groups that they are the victim? Do you have any thoughts on that? Or why does that help them to be the victim?
Well, it certainly helps them in the current climate, and certainly in the climate of the last presidential cycle of the last presidency. So many of these cases involve Donald Trump, or they involve this enigmatic sort of boogeyman of these racist white, usually Trump supporting men. It plays very well to them in these times, because it plays very well for them for the same reason that the Jussie Smollett hoax played out so well for Jussie Smollett until it was revealed that it was entirely a hoax. People, whether they know that these things are truthful or whether they have any idea that they might be staged, that doesn't stop them from exploiting them and using them to just ride them to their political ends, which could be an anti-Trump thing. In these cases, they just want to paint a narrative using facts that don't exist to paint a picture that is not supported by reality, that if you are a Muslim, if you're a practicing Muslim, let's say if you wear your hijab, then you should prepare to be the victim of this next incident. You should you should be on the lookout. You should effectively be paranoid that some knife-wielding Islamophobes are going to attack you or steal your purse or what have you.
So just a reminder to the audience, if you do have questions for Mr. Kalam, please do use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Stephen Gerzov writes, and he says, we need an acronym for this type of hoax, a word we can use to embarrass them for carrying this out in the first place, for the media not following up on it, and for the idea that Islamophobia is being driven by this failure to hold deceitful Islamists accountable. But this is obviously a phenomenon. You've come up with quite a few examples, and I'm sure there are others. And I believe we've discussed and written about some of those other examples in various pieces at the Middle East Forum in the past. So whether we have a term for it or whether we just draw attention to it, there's clearly an effort to be made here. But Stephen goes on to say, we need serious prosecution for people filing these false claims or making these false claims. Now, I guess that would apply if they're actually reporting this to the police. But in Ibn Farooq's case, right, we don't think he even went to the police. There was no contact with law enforcement. That was made up as well. His claims, we believe, his claims that he said. So I mean, we already spoke about a reckoning, but is there anything more that Muslims should be doing, ordinary moderate Muslims who are sick of this from their self-appointed Islamist leaders? Is there anything more that we should be doing? Is there anything that journalists should be doing aside from being better at their jobs? Who is not doing what here?
I think all of those groups of people that you just mentioned there are to varying degrees equally guilty of doing the same thing. Journalists and, in these cases, Muslim communities, Muslim advocacy groups, nonprofits, none of them bother to employ even just the slightest amount of skepticism or even just a basic, rudimentary journalistic questioning process to get even if for nothing else than to just get the details of these incidents and these attacks. But they don't do that. And I'm perhaps speculating here, but I think journalists oftentimes don't do that because they have a very attractive story that will surely go viral and get plenty of clicks. But Muslim communities don't do that because they already have their narrative from the moment that they read this news report, which the journalists in question here did very little to corroborate and actually verify. They run with these, whether it's true or not. And frankly, I don't think they care if it's true or not. There's been past instances where representatives from the Muslim Public Affairs Council have basically justified these fake anti-Muslim hate crimes by saying something along the lines of, let's say that it's the climate that is making these people do these things. It is the constant fear of Trump and of Trump supporters that would drive somebody to do this. But there's no skepticism, and there's also no accountability after the fact.
Okay. Now, the groups we've mentioned, groups like CARE, groups like MPAC, a lot of these, I think our listeners will know or be familiar with the idea that this is part of an Islamist network in the United States called the Muslim Brotherhood. But Uthman Ibn Farooq is not the Muslim Brotherhood, is he? He comes from a more Salafi style thinking. And just while we've got you, you attended this conference in Colorado that you mentioned. This was not your typical run-of-the-mill Islamist conference. It's not the Islamists that most of our listeners are familiar with. These were hardcore Salafis, I believe. Tell us about this conference. Is this, what were they saying? And do people like Farooq, does he have a particularly large network on which his sort of extreme ideology is being pushed and advanced? Does he have a serious network behind him?
Yeah, this conference was interesting. While in person, and even as these events were happening in the building and on the live stream, there were very, very few people present or watching, considering some of the speakers that were present. With Uthman Ibn Farooq, he is actually a very well-known, pretty famous Islamist preacher across the globe. His One Message Foundation YouTube channel, his organization, has hundreds of thousands of subscribers and viewers. All of his social media posts are met instantly with thousands of commenters singing his praise. And that's been very evident throughout this whole investigation and this whole ordeal. You could debunk Uthman Ibn Farooq's claims very easily and provide evidence, and yet his strong and extensive army of supporters just seems to cast all of the evidence aside because they just so desperately want his story to be true. This seemed to be the case for the most part at this conference I attended this weekend. While there was definitely a strong amount of expressed support for Uthman ibn Farooq, there was also a interesting equal amount of division that took place within this conference when another notable Islamist called Daniel Hakikatju, at this conference, they had set up an entire panel basically challenging Hakikatju's views and his positions and some of the claims he's made. Video of this altercation, of this confrontation, was posted to YouTube. It's received like nearly 50,000 views to date, and all of the hundreds of comments seem to be overwhelmingly in support of Hakikatju and actually against Uthman ibn Farooq. So I am curious to see how some of these divisions play out, especially in light of the events at this conference this weekend.
I see. So it's possible that should additional internal Islamist divisions continue to grow, continue to flourish, that these ostensibly or seemingly faked hate crimes that Farooq relies on to advance his own brand may end up working against him. We may find at some point Islamists even citing our material, perhaps, as part of these disagreements, which is something we have seen before, I think, in other countries. So this is fascinating. We have had a couple of questions just asking again about what is who is the target for these faked, seemingly faked incidents. Just about fellow Muslims, fellow Islamists, but then a few people ask, well, or is this more about the American political system? Is this a way to embarrass the right? And someone even asks, is this a way to embarrass President Trump? Which I think is quite a question. So Ahnaf, what do you think? Is this all about internal Muslim politics, or is this about wider, broader societal and political stuff as well?
Yeah, with the I do think it's a little less about internal Muslim politics with regards to these hate hoaxes, these fake hate crimes. I think most of these hate crimes that they stage are more aimed at yes, the political system. We saw many claims of Trump supporters or people wearing Trump hats or people espousing pro-Trump rhetoric that all turned out to be false, but it's a very common theme stringing all of these separate incidents together. Like I mentioned a moment ago, I think no matter what Uthman ibn Farooq says or any of these people who are staging these hate crimes say, there will always be a certain dedicated fraction of their followers who will just follow and believe everything they have to say, no matter what. But as a whole, I think most of this is certainly more politicized against the American right. In many cases, against the American left. Really, anybody who has been critical of Islam or Islamism, using these manufactured hate crimes, these people now have ammunition to say that this leads to this, and before you know it, you have people stabbing you and stealing your car because they are Islamophobes.
Ahnaf, thank you for your time. Where can our listeners go to read your writings and to follow your work?
Yes, so I am a regular contributor at the Focus on Western Islamism publication, which is probably the most pertinent writings on topics like these. I write on my Substack page. It's just my first and last name, ahnafkalam.substack.com. And you can follow me on Twitter. It's my first and last name, Ahnaf Kalam.
Okay. Ahnaf, thank you so much for your time today. To everyone else, thank you very much for joining another Middle East Forum webinar. This is a regular series. If you would like to sign up to learn about additional webinars, please do so at meforum.org. Thank you very much and have a delightful weekend. Bye-bye.